The first words don't so much begin as they erupt like a gunshot in the middle of silence. Woke up feeling like I might just kill somebody. It is not a calm introduction, not a measured reflection, but an explosion of raw impulse. This osp is not confession, it is proclamation. The voice is shaking the air, daring anyone listening to recoil. Violence here is not accidental, not gradual. It is a choice, a mood, state of being. The rhythm presses forward with disjointed, jagged breaths, spilling words that resist structure. How does it feel? I just want to feel like how she feels, is off my lip for the thrill. The repetition, the confusion, the contradictions. This is not the logic of a courtroom speech or the rhetoric of kings. It is the fevered muttering of someone trapped in their own head, where desire and destruction blur into one intoxicating thought. Even before we understand what has happened, we are dragged into the inner storm, and then the figure of death, the Reaper's knocking. Only God can stop me. The sudden appearance of the Reaper echoes centuries of human storytelling. In medieval Europe, plagira woodcuts often depicted death not as an abstract, but as a visitor at the door knocking, patient, inevitable. To wake with that sound in one's ears was no poetic metaphor. It was daily reality. The trenches of the First World War, soldiers spoke of death with the same casual familiarity. He was always near, always waiting, just beyond the dugout walls. Here, in this feverish verse, that same timeless presence presses against the doorframe. It's whispering through the wood. The tension sharpens. Yeah, God's angels watching. We got this. Here lies the duality. The Reaper's not countered by angels' wings. Every warrior in history has wrestled with that contradiction, the possibility that one fights not alone, but under divine supervision. In the Song of Roland, medieval knights swore that angels rode beside them in battle. In the diaries of Ottoman janissaries, battles were framed as theaters where heaven and earth met, soldiers believing themselves both mortal and eternal in the same moment. The speaker here leans into that contradiction, as if both salvation and damnation orbit his body. Then the vision collapses inward. Demon in my eyes, everybody aft to die. I don't even got to try. The demon is no longer outside, no longer the Reaper at the door, but staring back from within. His own reflection has become the monster. This theme of internal possession has haunted human history. In the Middle Ages, it was exorcisms. In the Enlightenment, it became madness and hysteria. In the 20th century, it was psychology, Freud's shadow, Jung's archetypes. Today, the demon is sung aloud, owned, flaunted, as if power lies not in resisting it, but in embracing it. The words cascade, tumbling into each other. Woke up, choosing violence. Bursting a silence, ego is a tyrant, is both mantra and curse. To choose violence is not just to accept conflict, it is to announce it as identity. This recalls the ancient Norse berserkers, men who entered battle already roaring, as if declaring their destiny before the first strike. To break silence with violence is an old human rhythm. It's found in every rebellion, every coup, every revolution where quiet was shattered by gunfire or chants echoing through the streets. Here in the first breaths, the scene is set. There is no calm prelude, no patient build. The listener is already hurled into the storm of a mind that wakes not with peace, but with war. This is the world as experienced by someone who measures existence in enemies, ghosts, and fleeting pleasures. We are not invited to understand, we are dragged to feel. And in that demand, in that suffocating intensity, history itself seems to echo, from the war chants of tribal raiders to the whispered prayers of soldiers. The opening chaos is always the same. Life begins not with safety, but with the looming presence of violence. Asterisk, the Reaper's knocking. Only God can stop me. The phrase lingers like a rattle at midnight. The Reaper is not introduced with ceremony, he simply appears, as if he has always been there, waiting outside the door. For centuries, across cultures, death has not been imagined as silence, but as movement. A figure who arrives. Medieval peasants envisioned him as a skeletal figure tapping his scythe against the doorframe. In the Mexican tradition of La Santa, Morte, the holy death. She is not merely an ending, but a companion sometimes feared, sometimes prayed to. In each case, death has weight, presence, sound, a knock, a whisper, a shadow crossing the threshold. The voice in the verse challenges that presence, declaring that only God has the power to intervene. Here, the battle lines are drawn between ultimate forces, death at the door, God in the heavens, and the speaker trapped between them, declaring defiance. It is a human theme, older than writing. Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, sought to wrest immortality from the gods. Achilles knew he was fated to die, but charged into battle to carve his name into eternity. Samurai swore oaths to live as if already dead. Death could not be avoided, only confronted. Yeah, God, angels watching, we got this. In this moment, the speaker claims not to be alone. If death is an adversary, then heaven itself has dispatched guardians to balance the scale. The idea of divine protection has comforted soldiers for millennia. Roman legions carried standards topped with golden eagles believed to channel Jupiter's gaze. In the Crusades, knights marched with relics said to hold fragments of saints. Bones convinced angels rode above their lances. Even today, soldiers etch psalms on their helmets or tattoo wings on their backs, invoking unseen companions in their struggle. And yet, alongside angels comes the admission, demon in my eyes. The battlefield is not out there. It is in the mirror. History teaches us that the most dangerous enemy has often been the one within. Joan of Arc described her visions as divine, but skeptics whispered that demons spoke through her. Macbeth saw ghosts that his own ambition summoned. Conquistadors, crossing oceans for gold, prayed in chapels, yet slaughtered in villages. The human eye has always been a doorway, sometimes for angels, sometimes for devils. The line, everybody effed to die, is not prophecy. It is mathematics. Mortality is the one certainty. The single equation no dynasty, no emperor, no artist has solved. The pharaohs entombed themselves with treasure, only to be plundered. The emperors of China built vast necropolises with rivers of mercury to cheat decay, yet their bones remain dust. The reaper knocks not once, but endlessly and always enters. The voice here recognizes that inevitability and spits back at it, not with resignation, but with swagger. Death is coming for all, and so the speaker need not try. Victory is inevitable, because the end is universal. This mixture defiance, inevitability, and the strange intimacy with death creates a chilling honesty. For what is more human than to know the reaper will come and still shout, "Not today, not, unless I choose it." The ancient Greeks told of Thanatos, the god of peaceful death, who could be wrestled with, tricked, or delayed. Sisyphus chained. Him, Hercules fought him. Orpheus bargained with him. Always, humans insisted that even the final certainty could be challenged. Thus, when the verse places us in a room where the reaper's knock echoes, we are not hearing something new. We are hearing the oldest sound humanity knows, the sound that rattled huts during plague, crept through palace chambers, and followed soldiers into muddy trenches. Only the names change. The knock remains. It will always remain as long. As humans open their eyes each morning and wonder whether today is the day death steps through the door. Yeah, God, angels watching. We got this. Demon in my eyes. Attention tightens. The voice does not linger in one world, but leaps between two, heaven above, hell within. The contradiction is not resolved. It is embraced. And that is, perhaps, the most honest reflection of human existence. For who among us has not felt watched over by something higher while simultaneously haunted by shadows crawling from within? History has always carried this duality. Kings once claimed the divine right of rule, announcing themselves as chosen by heaven, yet chronicles whispered of their cruelty, lust, and paranoia. Richard III prayed in chapels before betraying kin. Ivan the Terrible built cathedrals even as he unleashed terror upon his people. In every age, the angel and the demon have not been separate figures, but companions. Twinned in the same body, the line "everybody F to die" is less boast than revelation. It collapses both heaven and hell into a single truth. Mortality spares no one. This is not just a modern cry, echoes sermons of the medieval pulpit, where preachers reminded peasants and kings alike of the memento mori. Remember that you will die. Tombs were carved with angels and skeletons intertwined, reminding the living that sanctity and decay shared the same bed. But then, a voice leans into the darkness. I don't even gotta try. It is not merely that death comes for all it is that destruction becomes effortless. Here lies a deeper admission. When the demon looks through one's eyes, the barrier between intent and act vanishes. In the sagas of the Vikings, berserkers entered such states of frenzy that they were said to feel no pain. To strike without hesitation, their eyes glowing like embers in storm. In medieval Christian texts, possession was described that same way as wild words twisted, actions beyond human restraint. The demon does not whisper, it seizes. Yet even as the verse confesses to possession, it refuses submission. The speaker positions himself as both vessel and master, the angels. Our allies, the demon as weapon? This paradox recalls figures like Joan of Arc, whose voices were judged by some as holy and by others as madness. Or Rasputin, moving through the Russian court, seen as healer by some and devil by others. Every society has known such figures, those who seem to carry the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other, both speaking at once. Perhaps this is why such lines strike us so deeply. They do not describe a fantastical struggle. They describe us. The person praying in a cathedral, thinking of sin, is the general blessing his troops before unleashing slaughter. The parent whispering a lullaby while secretly drowning in anger. The demon in the eyes, the angel overhead. This is not contradiction, but the truest portrait of humanity. And so when the speaker declares both, when the voice shifts without apology from angelic assurance to demonic possession, it is not chaos. It is clarity. For to live is to walk with both wings and claws, to be at once watched by heaven and hunted by shadows, and to know that the war inside the chest will never truly end. Asterisk woke up choosing violence. The words hit like a blade unsheathed. Violence. Here is not reaction, but resolution. Not accident, but choice. To wake with such intent is to declare war before breakfast, to decide that peace has no place in the day's vocabulary. This isn't the outburst of a man cornered, but the creed of one who greets the dawn with sharpened teeth. Across centuries, cultures have known this ritualized embrace of violence. Vikings told of berserkers who entered battle, having chosen frenzy before the first clash of steel, their bodies painted, their minds already surrendered to rage. Samurai, bound by Bushido, rehearse death each morning as a way of life, meditate on death at every moment. Their texts urged, so that the moment of combat would never find them unprepared. Revolutionaries, too, have chosen violence. As a daily oath, Che Guevara wrote of waking with the will to shed blood for liberation while in Haiti. Enslaved men and women swore before Voodoo at spirits to rise and burn the plantations. The verse presses forward, bursting a silence. Ego is a tyrant. Here, the silence shattered is not merely quiet, but the suffocating hush of submission. Choosing violence is framed as liberation from stillness, from passivity. History repeats this rhythm. In 1789, the Bastille was not stormed because words failed. It was stormed because silence had become unbearable. In 1917, Petrograd workers did not remain quiet in their hunger. They burst silence with revolution. Silence may soothe the powerful, but to the restless, it becomes a prison wall waiting to crack. And yet the danger is named plainly. Ego is a tyrant. Here lies the paradox. Violence may shatter silence, may unseat kings, but it can also crown new tyrants, the tyrant within. Napoleon rose as liberator of France, then crowned himself emperor. Caesar began as defender of the Republic, but let his ambition bleed it dry. Robespierre preached virtue and ended with the guillotine at his throat. Ego, when enthroned, rules more ruthlessly than any monarch. The voice in this verse does not deny it, tit names it, as though acknowledging the Dictator sitting on the throne inside his skull, to wake up choosing violence is not a historical curiosity. It is a pattern that repeats wherever men and women decide that peace no longer feeds them, that silence no longer protects them, that their own pride will not allow them to kneel. But the cost of such a choice is heavy. Sometimes liberation, sometimes destruction, always blood. And so the line resounds, not just as boast, but as confession. In prefer of prop so sad for I was absent I have deaths I would wear so warrant someone once it's fine with I wanted if the tool we have reached for since stones were first lifted as weapons. It is both power and peril, promise and curse, and once chosen, it rarely leaves room for return. Asterisk ego is a tyrant. As the phrase drops like an iron verdict. Tyrants do not ask permission. They demand obedience. And here, the tyrant is not a king draped in robes, but the self, seated on a throne inside the chest, barking orders to the body, to the mind, to the world. When ego rules, it is not guidance, but domination. Not leadership, but enslavement. History is littered with examples of men who allowed ego to rule them as tyrant. Their kingdoms collapsing under the weight of pride. Alexander the Great conquered vast lands, yet in his final years, he demanded divine honors, convinced himself a god, and alienated those who had once followed him willingly. Julius Caesar, brilliant and adored, could not resist the coronation of his ego, marching into Rome as savior, yet grasping at power until daggers found his ribs. Napoleon crowned himself emperor, his hand placing the diadem on his own head. A gesture of supreme ego, he believed Europe could be bent to his will, and in that belief, he led his armies into the frozen wastelands of Russia, where pride froze alongside men. The tyrant within often mirrors the tyrant without. A man possessed by ego reshapes the world in his own image, silencing dissenters, surrounding himself with flatterers, demanding the same obedience from nations that his ego already commands of his heart. And just as kings raise palaces only to see them turned into ruins, so too does unchecked pride build castles of delusion that crumble into dust. The verse warns, but also admits. By naming ego a tyrant, the speaker is both exposing and indulging it. This is a paradox as old as literature itself. In Greek tragedy, hubris, overwhelming pride, was the fatal flaw that ensured downfall. Oedipus refused to heed prophecy and blinded himself in truth. Agamemnon paraded his victory only to be cut down in his own palace. The chorus always reminded the audience, pride is the tyrant that walks with a crown of fire, even outside of kings and conquerors. The ego tyrant is no stranger. Every revolution begins with liberation, but risks. Replacing one oppressor with another, freedom replaced by the ego of the victor. Every artist, every prophet, every rebel walks this narrow path. The voice that shouts for justice can, if enthralled by its own echo, become the voice that demands worship when the verse growls. This underscores getting tiring, we sense that. Wait, tyranny, even self-imposed, exhausts. Ego as tyrant does not allow rest, demands constant battle, constant hunger, constant proof of superiority. And so, the speaker sounds weary even as he confesses it, trapped in the endless cycle of self against self, master against subject, king against court within. To see ego as a tyrant is to glimpse both danger and inevitability for every human. Heart carries its own despot waiting to rise. Some resist, some surrender, and some, like the voice hears, stare straight into its eyes. Unflinching, knowing that to serve the tyrant is also to become it. I'm with all them egos and we have to take it all. The line is more than bravado, it is declaration of kinship. No one wages war alone, no one storms the world without allies. Brotherhood has always been the shield against isolation, the proof that even in chaos, loyalty binds stronger than chains. History remembers individuals, Napoleon, Genghis, Caesar, but beneath their names lay the brotherhoods that made them possible. Genghis Khan began not as an emperor, but as a leader of a small band of horsemen, bound by oath, who followed him through starvation and storm.
Wow.
The samurai swore loyalty not just to their lords, but to each other, forging bonds of honor that endured. Even in death, the medieval sagas of Iceland, brothers in arms were said to be closer than kin, because blood ties were inherited, loyalty was chosen. This sense of collective defiance, we have to take it all, carries echoes of pirate crews on the Caribbean seas who declared themselves free from kings, dividing loot equally, electing captains by vote. They were criminals, yes, but also pioneers of a raw, anarchic democracy, bound not by law, but by oath. In the same way, street brotherhoods, resistance groups, and rebel bands across time have all shared the same heartbeat. We stand together, or we fall separately. But alliances carry their own shadows. Loyalty can be both shield and shackle. The same Roman legions that swore unbreakable allegiance to their generals sometimes followed them into disastrous civil wars. In hardship can fracture when ambition seeps in, when the tyrant ego of one man outweighs the loyalty of many. The French Revolution began with unity, fraternity etched into banners, yet dissolved into betrayals, purges, and the guillotine's endless bite. The verse's insistence on being with comrades is a reminder that even the fiercest voices crave belonging. To choose violence is one thing, but to choose it together transforms it into movement, into power. Human history shows again and again that lone wolves burn quickly. But packs, whether of rebels, soldiers, or dreamers, can shake empires. And so, beneath the swagger, there is a truth that resonates across centuries. No man walks into the fire alone. He takes brothers with him, or he does not return at all. Asterisk Columbia on a column, but I cannot spray them off. The line flashes like a brief flare in the dark, evoking Columbia not as a landscape, but as a symbol, a column of power. Immovable, unshaken, resistant to any attempt to wash it away. The reference is fleeting, almost casual, but its weight pulls deep. Columbia has long stood in the world's imagination as a place of richness and danger, where empires of crops and powders have risen and collapsed, leaving behind legends written in both gold and blood. History remembers Columbia first as the land of El Dorado, the mythical city of gold that lured conquistadors into jungles where few returned. Centuries later, its soils gave rise to a different empire, the sprawling cartels of the late 20th century, whose wealth rivaled that of states, whose leaders were spoken of as kings in all but name. Pablo Escobar, the most infamous among them, became both demon and Robin Hood, erecting palaces even as his shadow stretched over corpses in city streets. In him, as in so many figures of power, the angel and the demon live side by side, feeding the poor with one hand while unleashing assassins with the other. But Columbia is not only a name for narcotics or conquest. Its story echoes older patterns of global history, the way human desire has always turned certain lands into crucibles of fortune and ruin. In the 18th century, Britain and China fought wars over opium, a drug that reshaped empires. Centuries before, spice routes across the Indian Ocean determined the fate of kingdoms. And sugar plantations in the Caribbean chained millions in slavery. Gold, opium, spices, sugar. Oil. Columbia's column is but the latest in a series of pillars upon which human greed has built temples. The verse's imagery, cannot spray them off, suggests permanence. Power built on such dangerous foundations does not wash away easily. It clings to history, seeping into soil and memory alike. Even today, Columbia's identity in the global imagination is entwined with the shadows of these past empires, much as Rome remains entwined with its Caesars or Egypt with its pharaohs. To invoke Columbia here is to summon more than a place, it is to summon an archetype. A reminder that the world's wealthiest empires often grow not from peace, but from peril. Not from purity, but from poison disguised as treasure. And those who stand near these columns of power, whether kings, cartels, or common men, must decide whether they will be crushed by them or try to climb them, risking a fall from heights few survive. Asterisk these vultures on my pillows. The image is grotesque, almost absurd, the place of rest, of dreams, infested by scavengers. A pillow is supposed to cradle the head, offer respite from the world's brutality. But here it is crowded by predators, creatures that feed not on strength, but on weakness. Waiting for the body to collapse so they may descend, the vulture has stalked human imagination for millennia. In Greek myth, Prometheus was chained to a rock, his liver devoured each day by an eagle. In that myth carries the same essence as the vulture. It's the predator that does not kill but feasts on what is already undone. In the deserts of ancient Egypt, real vultures hovered over battlefields, inspiring their place in hieroglyphs as symbols of both motherhood and menace. To the Aztecs, vultures were creatures of purification, consuming rot so that the earth could be cleansed. To others, they were only omens of death. Always they appear where blood has already been spilled. But vultures are not only birds, they are people. History has known them in every age, the opportunists who hover while others struggle, waiting to profit from collapse. When the Roman Empire began to fracture, senators and generals circled like carrion birds, tearing provinces into personal fiefdoms. During the Black Death, merchants hoarded grain and sold it at ruinous prices to the starving. In times of civil war, when cities burned, there were always those who saw not ashes but opportunity. That the verse places vultures on a pillow is its cruelest twist. It suggests there is no refuge from them, not even in sleep. Even in intimacy, even in vulnerability, the scavengers press close. This mirrors the lives of countless rulers and leaders who discovered that the closer they held companions, the sharper the talons became. Julius Caesar trusted Brutus as friend, yet Brutus struck deepest. Ottoman sultans were lulled to sleep by concubines, some of whom conspired against them. Kings died not in battle, but in their beds, smothered by those meant to protect them. The vulture on the pillow, then, is not simply a nightmare. It is a warning that power attracts predators, that success draws scavengers, and that even one's most private spaces can be invaded by those who hunger not for life, but for the remains of it. And yet, the image lingers with a bitter irony. For the vulture, in truth, is patient. It does not attack outright. It waits. Perhaps the speaker, surrounded by them, feels not threatened by their beaks, but mocked by their patience, reminded every night that his downfall will not come with a bang, but with the slow circling of wings overhead, descending only when he can resist no more. I gotta be a snake to feed my family, feed my dogs. I ain't come with no venom, but when it's time to bite, I'm Jaws. Here, survival is stripped bare. To live, to provide, requires transformation into something feared. The snake is not chosen out of vanity, but necessity's cunning, its silence. Its capacity to strike are the tools of survival in a world that offers no kindness. The serpent is one of humanity's oldest and most powerful symbols. The Bible, it tempts. Eve in the garden, embodiment of deception. In ancient Mesoamerica, it is exalted as Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, bringer of wisdom and renewal. In Hindu tradition, the Naga serpents coil around the gods, guardians of treasures and cosmic balance. The snake is at once feared and worshipped, despised as trickster. Honored as healer, the caduceus of medicine itself entwines serpents on a staff. To call oneself snake is to claim all these faces at once. The betrayer, the survivor, the wise, the deadly. Yet the speaker resists the image of venom. He is not poison, he insists. The snake here is not treachery, not betrayal, it is hunger and instinct. Venom kills quietly. Jaws kill openly, brutally. The image shifts from serpent to predator, from the subtle hiss in the grass to the bone-crushing bite of a great white shark. When it's time to bite, I'm Jaws. This is escalation, transformation, not passive waiting, but explosive force. Survival through overwhelming violence. History has always admired those who, forced by need, adopted the mask of predator. The Spartans were taught from youth to steal, to deceive, to survive unseen until the moment of strike. Native tribes across the Americas painted snakes on their bodies before battle, drawing on the creature's feared reputation to magnify their own. Guerrilla fighters in jungles and deserts alike have learned to slither unseen, then strike with precision that terrifies armies larger than themselves. To be a snake, to be Jaws, is to admit that survival is not gentle. Families are not fed by hesitation, nor are dogs guarded by softness. Every empire, every dynasty, every household that endured scarcity did so not by innocence, but by cunning and force. The farmer who hoarded grain while neighbors starved, general who betrayed allies to preserve his troops, the parent who stole bread in the night owl, took on the serpent's silence or the predator's jaws. But beneath the boast lies a weary truth. To become snake or Jaws is not a dream, it is a burden. Few celebrate the necessity of venom or the hunger of teeth. These are masks worn because the world demands them, because to refuse them is to starve. The serpent has always been feared because it is honest. Survival is not clean, slithers. It bites, it tears. And sometimes, the only way to protect what you love is to embrace the hiss in your own throat. To feel your teeth sharpen against the bone of necessity. Asterisk, I was born a smoky villain. It's been smoke since I was born. The words strike with the weight of inevitability. It is not the story of a fall from grace. It's the claim of someone who never had grace to begin with. Smoke is not simply an atmosphere here. It is origin, birthright, the first breath inhaled at the moment of life. To be born in smoke is to be born in aftermath, after fire, after destruction, after war. History is filled with generations raised in such conditions. Spartan children entered a world where survival meant training for war before they could walk. The streets of 17th century London were choked in literal smoke from fires and furnaces, where poverty and soot sculpted lives of hardship. In the 20th century, entire generations were born in smoke during wartime, the infants of Stalingrad, whose first lullabies were air raid sirens, the children of Hanoi growing beneath clouds of napalm. Identity shaped by smoke is not metaphor, but reality. To call oneself a villain is to embrace the role the world has already assigned. In medieval morality plays, the villain was not merely the evildoer, but the necessary foil, the one against whom saints and heroes proved their virtue. History's rebels often carried this branding. Spartacus was villain to Rome, Toussaint Louverture villain to the French, Nat Turner villain to the American South, yet each was also hero to their people. Villainy, in truth, is perspective written by victors. To be born a villain is to know the script was written against you before you ever spoke your first line. It's been smoke since I was born. The repetition hammers the point. There was never a clean sky. Smoke is the residue of fire, of destruction, of burning fuel and broken structures. To live always in smoke is to live in aftermath, to inherit wounds rather than wealth. Children of warlords, slaves, peasants, or prisoners have all borne this inheritance. Their lullabies were clashes, their lullabies were screams. They grew not in peace, but in embers. And yet smoke carries more than despair, it carries transformation. Out of smoke, phoenixes rise. Empires burn, but smoke becomes the signal that something new has begun. The French Revolution left Paris, clouded in smoke, yet out of it rose a new republic. Hiroshima was ash and smoke, yet its survivors rebuilt cities of steel and neon. To be born in smoke is to inherit not only ruin, but resilience. To breathe not only poison, but the proof that one has survived what was meant to end them. So when the verse claims villainy from the first breath, when it boasts of smoke as permanent atmosphere, it is both lament and defiance. The speaker is saying, I was never meant for innocence. I was baptized in ashes, raised in chaos, and if I am villain, it is because the world itself set the stage in fire. Asterisk, you ain't riding regular. Baby, you riding in a foreign? Rolls Royce pulling through the gate? This ain't no crib. This more like an estate. The voice shifts suddenly from smoke and struggle to glittering affluence. Survival once demanded jaws and venom. Now it demands symbols, steel, engines, gates, and estates. The Rolls-Royce, that floating cathedral of leather and chrome, becomes proof that power has been not only seized but displayed. History has always used luxury as its loudest language. Egyptian pharaohs entombed themselves in chambers stuffed with gold and lapis lazuli, jewels meant to impress gods and thieves alike. Versailles gleamed with mirrors and chandeliers, designed so Louis XIV could remind all who entered that he was not merely king but son. In the Gilded Age, industrial barons built mansions that mocked palaces. Fountains sprang over marble staircases, while factory workers collapsed outside. Power does not whisper, it builds gates high enough to be seen from miles away. The line, "They made a mistake," letting underscore in the place drips with both triumph and threat. It is the voice of the outsider who has breached the fortress, who now stands where only kings once walked. History is full of such intrusions. Rome trembled when barbarians stormed its marble halls. The French aristocracy watched peasants march into Versailles. In every era, estates built to keep the wrong people out eventually became the stages for their entrance. Yet the verse does not present this luxury as safety. Instead, it treats it as battlefield. Desire fuels ambition, but ambition demands constant defense. Estates require guards. Gates are not only for decoration, but for protection. The Rolls-Royce gliding through the iron entrance is both trophy and target. Those who rise to power by violence or cunning often find that wealth does not silence vultures, it attracts more of them. And beneath all this is the human truth. Luxury is not simply about comfort, it is about validation. Rolls-Royce estate. Foreign cars, these are not beds or bread. They are proof to the world that one has escaped smoke and villainy, that one has climbed from hunger to a throne. In every society, wealth has been the mirror held up to declare, "I am no longer prey, I am power." But history teaches that such displays can be dangerous. Marie Antoinette's gowns did not save her from the guillotine. Scobar's haciendas became ruins patrolled by soldiers. Mansions rise as fast as they fall, and the glitter of luxury has often marked the beginning of downfall. To flaunt desire is to summon envy, and envy has toppled as many thrones as swords. So when the verse roars about estates and foreign rides, it is not only brag, it is prophecy. The speaker has entered the halls meant to exclude him, but the same gates that opened may one day close. The Rolls-Royce that glides in triumph may also serve as the chariot that carries him toward exile or ruin. She'll act out of line. Watch how fast she'll get replaced. The words strike cold. Here affection is not sanctuary, is transaction, fragile and replaceable. Desire is framed not as connection but as conquest, another battlefield where dominance must be asserted. The woman becomes not partner but position, a chair that can be filled by whoever is next in line. History is heavy with echoes of such disposability. In royal courts, marriages were rarely about love. They were contracts, alliances, strategies. Catherine of Aragon, Queen of England for decades, was set aside by Henry VIII when she could not give him a son, replaced by Anne Boleyn, who herself was later replaced by execution. In the Ottoman Empire, sultans cycled through concubines and harems, where women lived in splendor but also in constant peril, their fates determined by the shifting moods of power. Even in the courts of ancient China, empresses could fall overnight, their families erased from records, their rivals elevated. This underscore on her mind, "Think I'm really after you, Chase." The line carries disdain, rejection of vulnerability. To chase would mean to surrender pride, to bend the tyrant ego. And so the voice refuses. But beneath this refusal lies a broader truth. Intimacy has always been tangled with dominance. Two kings, emperors, generals, or warlords, desire was rarely about tenderness. It was about display. Who one loved, who one bedded, who one cast. Aside all became statements of power. Yet the story is not one-sided. History also records women who understood these games and turned them to their own advantage. Cleopatra seduced Caesar and Mark Antony, not simply for affection, but for the survival of Egypt. Empress Wu Zetian rose from concubine to ruler of all China. Wielding charm and cunning until her hand gripped the imperial seal, desire may be used as weapon against women, but women, too, have often turned that weapon back upon those who sought to wield it. The verse's sharpness. Its willingness to discard mirrors a long tradition of men who measured worth not in loyalty, but in novelty. Kings filled harems, popes fathered illegitimate children, lords paraded mistresses as proof of virility. But the fragility of these arrangements has always been dangerous. Behind every dismissed lover is the risk of betrayal. Behind every replacement is the seed of revenge. Brutus may have struck Caesar, but how many rulers in history first felt betrayal not at the hands of generals, but of spurned lovers, discarded allies, or abandoned queens? To reduce desire to replacement is to wield it as a weapon. Yet weapons, once drawn, do not remain in the hand of one side forever. History warns, the game of replacement may secure power in the short term, but it leaves behind enemies with memories sharper than daggers. Asterisk, this ain't no game. The declaration lands like a stone in still water, cutting through the boasting and glitter. It is both reminder and warning. What may look like play, what may sound like swagger, is in truth survival. The stakes are not tokens but lives, not trophies but power, not applause but blood. History is filled with arenas where life and death were cloaked as entertainment. In Rome, gladiators fought beneath the roar of the Colosseum crowd, their struggles framed as spectacle, but to them it was no game. Each strike was a decision between living another day or dying beneath sand darkened with blood. In medieval tournaments, knights charged in jousts meant as pageantry, at lances shattered ribs, and men fell dead before cheering kings. Even in courts where power was wrapped in silks and smiles, the game of intrigue ended in dungeons, exiles, or execution blocks, food on the plate. When they say what's up, the feelings hide behind the face. Here the verse shifts into the realm of masks. Everyone plays a role, concealing hunger, fear, or envy behind smiles and greetings. The banquet table becomes a metaphor for survival. The meal laid out, but only for those quick enough, ruthless enough, or connected enough to take it. In Versailles, courtiers smiled and bowed, yet every gesture concealed schemes to gain the king's favor. In the Ottoman palace, viziers whispered polite words while plotting poison in secret. The face becomes mask, the greeting becomes weapon. This duality life is both feast and trap is ancient. In Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus dined with strangers who plotted to kill him. In Shakespeare's plays, masks and banquets often precede betrayal. Human history has always known that the table is as dangerous as the battlefield. To say this ain't no game is to strip away the pretense. The streets, the courts, the palaces, they may look like boards with pieces moved in jest, but the players bleed when struck and the losers are erased. Even laughter can be fatal. In the French Revolution, nobles laughed at peasants until the guillotine answered. In the 20th century, dictators held feasts where a wrong toast could mean disappearance by morning. The verse captures this. Truth with unflinching bluntness. Behind the bravado lies awareness. Life wears a mask of play, but beneath it is nothing but seriousness. To treat it as game is to misunderstand the stakes. To see it as survival is to play honestly. And so the warning stands timeless. Whether in arenas, courts, or streets, what looks like game is theater for the crowd. For the players, it is always real, always blood, always fatal. Asterisk, the verse twists suddenly into something surreal. Gangsta Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving. At first, it almost feels absurd, a holiday of gratitude, family tables. Laughter and turkey colliding with the chaos of violence, demons, and death. But the collision itself is the point. The feast and the fight have always been closer than we imagine. Across history, the conclusion of bloodshed often gave way to feasting. After Viking raids, warriors gathered around fires, their tables heavy. With stolen goods, their horns filled with mead, singing songs that glorified the slaughter behind them. The Romans staged triumphs, parading captives and treasures through the streets before ending in days of banquets. Even in medieval Europe, after battles that left fields soaked with blood, nobles celebrated victories with vast spreads of roasted meat as though the feast itself consecrated the violence. The American holiday of Thanksgiving, too, has its shadows. Beneath the myth of peace between settlers and native peoples lies a history stained with betrayal and blood. Feasts marked not just harvests, but also conquests. What is presented as gratitude was often built on dispossession, the victors eating at long tables, while others were driven from the land. To call violence a Thanksgiving is to reveal the truth that gratitude and brutality have often walked hand in hand. In the verse, the repetition, Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving, feels less like celebration and more like ritual chant. It carries the rhythm of sacrifice, echoing how ancient societies offered feasts to gods after slaughter. The Aztecs raised temples where hearts were torn from chests and blood ran down steps, followed by rituals of song and food. The Celts lit bonfires, feasted, and drank after battle, honoring both the dead and the gods. The idea that killing and gratitude could share the same table is not new. It is one of humanity's oldest paradoxes. But why place this imagery here, at the end of so much chaos? Perhaps because violence, like feasting, is communal. No warrior wages war for himself. Alone, no table is filled without others to share it. The gangsta Thanksgiving is the banquet after survival. It's the grim laughter after the smoke clears. The toast raised not because the world is peaceful, but because one has lived another day within it. It is unsettling because it is true. From the sagas of Norse raiders to the halls of victorious kings, from the myths of harvest to the chants of modern songs, humanity has always celebrated after destruction. To eat is to live, and to feast after bloodshed is to declare survival as victory. Thus, when the voice chants Thanksgiving in the midst of demons, angels, and death, it is not contradiction, it is honesty. For in the end, every feast is also memorial, every toast raised above a battlefield we choose to forget. Have somebody, I feel the MDMA kicking in, it's about to be one of them. Why can't I feel my face? The verse shifts from knives and demons to chemicals and haze. Yet the thread is unbroken. It is still about survival, still about finding a way to endure a world soaked in chaos, where once the weapon was violence. Here it is, numbness. If pain cannot be fought, it can be blurred. The search for escape through intoxication is as old as humanity. In the ancient Near East, Sumerians brewed beer as early as 4000 BCE, pouring it not just for pleasure, but for ritual. Believing intoxication brought them closer to the gods. In Mesoamerica, peyote and mushrooms were consumed in ceremonies to pierce the veil of reality. The Greeks drank wine in Dionysian festivals until order dissolved into ecstatic chaos. To lose control was not seen as weakness, but as transcendence. A way to break free from the tyranny of consciousness. But there has always been danger in that pursuit. Why can't I feel my face? It's more than physical sensation. It is metaphor for disconnection, for losing the self inside the fog. Shakespeare's Falstaff drowned in ale to hide his cowardice. Chinese poets wrote of drinking themselves into oblivion, both to find beauty and to escape corruption. Opium dens in 19th century London offered visions to those desperate to forget hunger and squalor. The body numbs, the mind drifts, but the pain that birthed the escape waits on the other side. It felt like something was missing. That admission is universal. Every sip, every puff, every pill has been pursued not for the substance itself, but for the absence it promises to fill. For the soldier haunted by war, it is the silence of nightmares. For the laborer crushed by endless toil, it is the fleeting illusion of rest. For the ruler weighed by paranoia, it is the temporary erasure of fear. Substance becomes substitute, fragile bridge across the abyss of longing. Yet history also reminds us that intoxication has inspired as much as it has destroyed. The poets of the Tang dynasty produced verses that still echo, often written under the haze of wine. Baudelaire and the Romantics sought hashish and opium as gateways to imagination. Even the Oracle of Delphi, breathing intoxicating fumes, gave visions that shaped empires. To be numb is not only to flee, it can also be to create two glimpsed truths inaccessible in sobriety. Still, the refrain of numbness lingers, about to be one of them. To surrender to chemicals is to join a lineage of souls who chose to blur rather than bear. Some found beauty there, others never returned. The face that cannot be felt is not only a symptom, it is a warning. For numbness is both refuge and abyss, salvation, and undoing. And so the verse captures the timeless paradox: humanity's hunger not only for survival, not only for power, but for escape. The bottle, the pill, the ritual, the chant, different vessels, the same yearning. Feel less? To feel nothing. To forget, if only for a while, the smoke and the vultures and the jaws. Asterisk, my DNA still works through the game. The line is simple but heavy, claiming survival not only of the body but of the blood. DNA becomes more than a code of biology, it becomes a signature etched into history, proof that the struggle is not just personal but generational. The speaker is not alone. He is the sum of ancestors, carrying their battles, their hunger, their scars forward into the present. History has always been haunted by this idea that blood dictates destiny. Dynasties rose on it, royal families guarded it, and ordinary people endured within it. The pharaohs of Egypt proclaimed themselves children of the gods, their bloodline divine, unbroken through centuries. In medieval Europe, monarchies intermarried to preserve pure lines, believing that a single drop of foreign blood could weaken empires. Even today, surnames and family legacies carry weight, whispering that the deeds of fathers will either elevate or curse their children. But DNA is not only about nobility, it is also about survival. Enslaved Africans carried their songs, their rhythms, their resilience across oceans, passing them down through generations until they became the backbone of blues, gospel, jazz, hip-hop. Indigenous peoples massacred and displaced still breathe their ancestors' defiance into modern chants and protests. DNA's memory, not just of triumph, but of trauma, still alive in the marrow of descendants. The line claims continuity still works through the game. The speaker suggests that while others may retire, fade, or collapse, his blood ensures persistence. This echoes how clans and tribes across history invoked ancestry to justify their endurance. The Norse traced lineage to Odin, warriors claiming divine toughness. Samurai families recorded unbroken genealogies to prove their right to wield the sword. In African griot traditions, the stories of forefathers are sung so that each generation feels the pulse of its lineage within. Yet, legacy is double-edged. It can be gift, but also burden. The son of a king inherits not just crown, but enemies. The daughter of a revolutionary inherits both pride and danger. To claim DNA as destiny is to accept both honor and curse, both strength and shadow. Blood is unyielding, it carries fire as well as ash. Through the game, the phrase matters. Life here is framed as a game of survival, violence, loyalty, betrayal. DNA is the cheat code, the ancient script still running beneath modern chaos. Unlike a game, there are no resets, no safe restarts. The blood carries everything: joy and grief, victories and wounds forward. It's unbroken. And so the verse places the speaker in a lineage that stretches beyond his own body. He's not just man, but vessel, carrying centuries within his veins. DNA still works, not because it is flawless, but because it endures. And endurance, in history as in blood, is the only true proof of victory. Asterisk, the verse circles back on itself. Layering intoxication over violence, angels over demons, survival over self-destruction. My DNA still works through the game, the MDMA kicking in, the Reapers knocking. It reads like a spiral, each image feeding the next, each escape pulling the speaker deeper into the trap. Addiction here is not painted as weakness, but as fate, a tyranny as absolute as the ego that ruled earlier lines. Human history has always been marked by substances that bind as tightly as chains. The Romans drank wine so thick it blurred judgment, and emperors like Nero let their reigns dissolve in drunken haze. In the 19th century, Britain's hunger for profit flooded China with opium, sparking wars that left millions enslaved, not by shackles but by powder. Even today, streets across the globe echo with this same rhythm. Substances that promise freedom, creativity, or numbness, but deliver only dependence. What makes addiction tyrannical is not simply its power to enslave, but its ability to disguise itself as choice. Woke up choosing violence? I feel the MDMA kicking in. The speaker presents these not as compulsion but as decision, a daily oath. Yet history shows how often humans mistake chains for crowns. Macbeth believed he chose ambition freely. Yet prophecy had already sealed his doom. Oedipus thought he fled his fate. Yet each step only carried him toward it. Addiction works in the same way. Indulgence feels voluntary, yet each one tightens the circle, making the next inevitable. And the tyrant within ego thrives in such a cycle. Addiction feeds pride, I control this, then strips it away in humiliation, then restores it in another high. It is a loop as old as tragedy itself. In Greek plays, characters were not punished for their first step, but for their inability to step aside. The same pattern haunts modern lives. The drink, the pill, the hit repeated. Not out of joy, but out of compulsion, till the line between choice and curse dissolves. Everybody have to die. That refrain, once a boast, now sounds like resignation. Addiction convinces its subjects that since death is inevitable, surrender to it might as well be ecstatic. In this logic lies its cruelty. It transforms the universal truth of mortality into justification for self-destruction. Why fight the Reaper, it whispers, when you can dance with him instead? But history also shows that addiction, like fate, is not unbreakable. Odysseus resisted the Lotus Eaters, dragging his men back to their ships despite the sweetness of forgetfulness. Civilizations that nearly drowned in intoxication, China with opium, America with alcohol, have also fought back. Clawing for control? The tyrant may sit on the throne, but resistance has always been possible, though never without cost. Thus, the verse's swirling imagery of drugs, demons, DNA. An ego is not merely chaos, is recognition of a cycle as old as myth. The tyranny of addiction is not just chemical. It is destiny dressed as desire, fate disguised as freedom. And to name it is already an act of rebellion, even if escape remains uncertain. Through the roar of verses, demons in the eyes, jaws in the mouth, Rolls-Royce at the gate, one theme thrums steady. Violence is not simply an act, but an identity. Woke up choosing violence. Born a smoky villain, a voice does not describe occasional battles or fleeting outbursts. It describes existence itself as war, selfhood itself as weapon. To be alive is to be armed. History offers countless figures who wore violence as skin. The Viking berserker, remembered not as farmer or father, but as storm of blood on the battlefield. The Mongol horseman, feared as embodiment of terror, his name enough to empty villages before his arrival. The gladiator, fighting beneath Rome's gaze, became identity itself, a body valued not for who he was, but for how he killed. These were not roles men stepped into. There were roles that devoured them until violence was no longer performance, but essence, and yet our fascination with such figures has never waned. Crowds filled arenas to cheer gladiators. Sagas praised the berserkers' madness as divine. Even in modern times, films, novels, and songs idolize the outlaw, the gangster, the rebel. Why? Because such figures embody the defiance we secretly crave, the refusal to bow, the audacity to seize, the courage or recklessness to live as if tomorrow does not matter. But there is also fear. To make violence one's identity is to carry death within at all times. Samurai trained to see themselves as already dead, so that hesitation would never slow the sword. Revolutionaries declared themselves martyrs before their first strike. To live as weapon is to shorten one's life in exchange for intensity. Many of history's most violent heroes burned fast, Achilles falling young at Troy, Alexander dead. Before 33, Tupac and Biggie gone in their 20s. The identity consumes, even as it immortalizes. Demon in my eyes. That line captures the paradox. Violence as both empowerment and curse. The speaker wears it proudly, but he is also haunted by it. This duality reflects our own unease. We are drawn to such figures, yet we know they live on borrowed time. They remind us of something uncomfortable, that civilization itself was built by violence, even as it pretends to rise above it. And perhaps that is why these words strike so deeply. They are not fantasies, they are mirrors. We live in societies, polished by laws, markets, and etiquette. But beneath them beats the same truth. The world has always rewarded those willing to strike first. Here at 2Cs, to embrace the Reaper's knock rather than wait for it. The speaker does not invent this truth, he names it. Blunt and unashamed. Violence as identity unsettles, because it is both alien and familiar. We fear it in others, but we sense its echo in ourselves. And when it is spoken aloud with such raw certainty, we cannot help but listen half horrified, half enthralled. Asterisk threaded through the verse is a rhythm older than song. Rise, display, fall. The voice boasts of jaws and demons, then of Rolls-Royce estates, then of intoxication and numbness. It is the same pattern written across history's tablets: power, claimed through violence, displayed through wealth, eroded through excess. Empires have followed this cycle like clockwork. Rome began as a republic of farmers and soldiers hardened by necessity, but as wealth flooded in, the empire swelled with luxury and intrigue. Gladiator games distracted the masses while emperors drowned themselves in wine. Then came decay, collapse, vultures circling marble ruins. The Mongols stormed across Asia with unmatched ferocity, but their descendants grew divided, seduced by the comforts of conquest, until the empire fractured. Even revolutionary France, born in fire and smoke, crowned itself with blood and glory, only to devour its own children. At the center of these spirals lies ego. Ego is a tyrant. History's tyrants rarely fell to foreign armies alone. They fell to their own excesses, their own inability to restrain the hunger for more. Nero burned Rome not because he lacked power, but because his vanity demanded spectacle. Aetolian's armies froze in Russia not because they lacked skill, but because his ambition blinded him to limits. Addiction, arrogance, desire, these were the cracks in their armor, the demons in their eyes. The verse embodies this very cycle. Violence is chosen as tool of ascent. Luxury is flaunted as symbol of conquest. Chemicals are consumed as shield against emptiness. Each stage feeds the next, until survival transforms into destruction. The Rolls-Royce is not just proof of triumph, it is omen of downfall, just as Versailles foreshadowed revolution. And yet, we are drawn to this cycle because it is both warning and seduction. To rise through violence, to claim estates, to defy. The reparate is intoxicating. But we know as listeners, as readers of history, that such stories rarely end with peace. They end in betrayal, in exile, in graves adorned with jewels that cannot be carried beyond. The cycle is cruel, but it is also human. Perhaps that is why the voice tells it without apology, even with pride. To burn out in smoke and chaos may be destruction, but it is also memory. History remembers those who rode the cycle, even as it destroyed them. Alexander, Caesar, Napoleon, Scabar. Their stories linger because they lived at the edge where violence, wealth, and ruin blur. And so the verse does not simply warn, it participates. It places its speaker in that same lineage of figures who lived fast, ruled fiercely, and fell hard. The vultures wait, the reaper knocks, but for now, the banquet is full, the Rolls-Royce gleams, and the tyrant ego still commands. Asterisk the echoes. Fade, but do not quiet. Angels and demons, Rolls-Royce and reaper, smoke and numbness, all linger like embers in the chest. What began with the knock of death ends not with resolution, but with an unsettling recognition. Violence, ego, and survival are not temporary intrusions in human life. They are. It's scaffolding, it's shadow, it's constant refrain. Gangsta Thanksgiving. The phrase keeps circling, absurd yet honest. It is not about turkey or blessings, it is about survival dressed as celebration, violence disguised as gratitude. And isn't that the story of humanity? We feast after wars, we toast after victories, we sing after revolutions end as the dead lie silent beneath our feet. History is filled with such contradictions, banquets after massacres, coronations after executions, hymns sung over battlefields. Celebration and destruction have always shared the same table. The voice throughout the verse has been one of defiance, almost theatrical in its bravado. But beneath the boasts, beneath the venom and the jaws, lies something deeper: exhaustion. The admission that ego is a tyrant. The confession of vultures circling the bed. The craving to numb the face, to forget. These are not just boasts, they are fractures, glimpses of weariness beneath the armor. History has known this too. Alexander wept when no more worlds remained to conquer. Emperors wandered their palaces in paranoia. Kings stared at crowns that weighed heavier with each passing year. The tyrant within always wins eventually, not with daggers, but with silence. Yet the speaker does not retreat. He ends where he began, in smoke, in violence, in declaration. To live in chaos is not chosen once, but chosen daily. And if the reaper still knocks, if vultures still circle, if ego still shouts, then the answer is not surrender, but another day of survival. That too is legacy. Not peace, not redemption, but endurance. The story we have heard is not unique to one voice, one song, or one moment. It is the story of humanity told again and again, born in smoke, clawing toward power, flaunting wealth, numbing pain, collapsing under weight, rising again, cycle as old as fire, as certain as death. And so the final note does not resolve it, haunts. Because perhaps the truth is this: we are all haunted by angels and demons. We all dine at tables built on violence. We all wear the tyrant ego like a crown we cannot take off. Some fall quickly, some endure longer, but none escape. The reaper knocks, the banquet waits, and history, patient as ever, records it all.